Hello, everyone, and welcome. While we are waiting for everyone to join, I'd love to know where you are all joining from. So feel free to drop your location in the chat. So nice. I see Belgium, I see UK, Belgium again, Poland, Austria, Lyon, France, Austria, Germany, Bulgaria. Keep them coming. Great to see such a mix of countries already. Paris, of course, South Africa. Wow. Croatia. Nice. Spain, Lithuania. So while we are waiting for a few more people to join, I would like to start with a quick poll here. So how ready are you navigating e-invoicing today?
How big was that wine tasting event? This is the second time I'm hearing about that one.
It wasn't that big. I mean, it was very nice, but I actually had to leave early. I'm wondering if it was even more fun after I left. Um, but yeah, Jean-Yves, I remember a really good Australian wine. That's the one I remember the most. Um,
Not the
similar,
French one, Juan?
I must. They were very very good wines, but yeah, the one I remember the most as good was a red wine from Australia. But yeah, I love the
Okay.
variety. Go ahead. Sorry. Stop.
No, no, no. No, I'm just saying like a lot of people are already responding. So good to see. So we are just waiting for a few seconds more for the late joiners before we get started. But we see here that most of the people here are still exploring options. So you are in the right place to come to this webinar. Oh, okay. Umar Azam from the UK have operations in France, Spain, UK, Luxembourg, Germany, Poland, and Czechoslovakia. This is the right place for you. So I think we'll get started now. Today's session is about one of the biggest changes that finance team in Europe will face in the next few years. We will walk you through what the new e-invoicing ways means, how different countries are moving to structured e-invoicing, and how to turn this shift into a real automation advantage. So this shift is happening faster than most companies realize. So today is about giving you the clarity and practical guidance that you need to align with each country's mandate. So I am Esther. I'm the product manager, product marketing manager at Payhawk, and with me are Pavel Hatsif. Pavel is the senior product marketing product manager leading the AP and e-invoicing work, and also Juan Molinar, the CEO and co-founder of Invopop, which is one of the most advanced global platform for structured invoicing. First, Pavel will explain to you what this shift means for companies using Payhawk and how we are supporting the upcoming mandates. And then Juan will walk you through the regulatory and technical landscape across Europe. And throughout the sessions, please feel free to add questions in the Q&A tab. We will answer this as many as possible at the end. And please don't use the comment because it's harder for us to track your questions. But if you use the Q&A tab, then people can upvote your questions. So it's easier for us also to make sure that your questions get answered. So here's the roadmap for today. First, why this shift is happening, and second, what invoicing actually is and what is it isn't, and then the European timeline country by country, the fragmentation problem, and finally a live demo inside Payhawk that Pavel will conduct, and then we will finish with a Q&A and a short wrap up. So To set the stage and explain why all this matters, specifically for finance team today and for Payhawk customers, I will hand this over to Pavel. Over to you, Pavel.
Thank you, Asta. And thank you again, everyone, for joining. I see we have 146 people now, so quite a big crowd. And thank you to Juan for being so kind to join us here on stage as our partnered expert on the invoicing matter, which we're going to happily leverage for his expertise on this webinar. So why are we here today is that we've been talking to more and more customers as an AP provider ourselves, and we're seeing that Europe is entering this really big regulatory shift, probably the biggest one since GDPR. And we're seeing a lot of confusion in the market about what this is, how it affects businesses, and what's the quickest way to navigate that regulatory change without it impacting your business. And truth be told, I don't think Europe is making it easy for anyone. We've seen that every country is relying on different frameworks, different formats, different networks. They have different rollout phases and timelines. It's quite hectic. Unless you're in the very details of the domain, it's really easy to understand how this is impacting you. So why we're here is over time, every country in Europe is moving away from PDFs. PDFs are not structured form of data. We need to basically to automate the data extraction from them. We need to scan them with AI, understand the text on it, and try to guess like what is the actual data in it. Obviously, that does not mean a great thing about transparency, validation, and just making sure that we limit tax fraud to a minimum. So this is why every country in Europe is starting to move towards these structured invoices and mandating on how they're actually being exchanged between the suppliers and the buyers. And from our experience, when we talk to customers day in and day out, we've seen that finance teams are struggling to get the clarity that they need to navigate this. So this is why we're trying to position ourselves in a way that we can help you solve that directly in the product for AP and partner with companies like Invopop to make sure that we have the right positioning to support you in this change. Now, without further ado, let's dive into more details on what invoicing actually is. And for that, I'll happily hand over the mic to Juan, who can explain a little bit more on the domain.
Yeah, thank you, Pavel. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Very excited to be here. As I say, the one thing that excites me the most about Invopop is when we get to partner with forward-looking companies like Payhawk and solve the questions of so many people. First of all, I love to see there's such a different and big crowd of. We've got people from Spain, people from France, from Belgium. I see a lot of these countries that are introducing invoicing. So I'm here to answer all those questions. Hopefully, I've been told to not go way too much into detail. I have a tendency to do that, especially with invoicing. So I'll keep it as high level as I can, and then we got the question and answer at the end of the call to get into the details that you guys prefer. So first, what is invoicing? Pavel already introduced it a bit. The main change here is that an invoice is not a PDF. It's in a structured format that a machine can read automatically, right? That usually means an XML. It could be other extensions like JSON, etc. But reality is in all Europe, countries are choosing to do this in the XML extension, right? By law, in Europe, by directive, they need to comply with a certain standard that you might hear around, which is called the 16931 standard, which basically says what are the mandatory fields and the naming of those fields, etc. But probably too much detail for now. What you need to take away is that PDFs, obviously paper, are the past, and governments around the world are forcing companies to interchange structured formats like XML. The advantages of these are clear. First, your ERP, your AP solution is going to be able to automatically read that information, 100% accuracy, no need for AI. It's just defining the format itself. And also, there's a advantage that I'm sure we'll discuss later for the tax authorities. So tax authorities have like a double reason for these because obviously they love structured information so they can see what's happening. So just take away, it's a XML format. The issue, as Pavel was saying, is that in Europe we haven't done a great job at getting together and defining one single XML format. So depending on where you're from, you might have heard about the Peppol-based format, the Eschrechnung or Zuckford in Germany, Facturex, UBL, CII in France. Factura PA in SDI or Facturae in Spain, and I could go on and on. So all of these are basically different definitions. So if you open those XMLs, they don't look the same. They look similar, but unfortunately, that makes a lot of fragmentation in the market, and it makes it very hard to comply with all of them at the same time. So we already knew XMLs, different formats around Europe. And then the other part is, okay, you're sending an XML, but how are you going to send that XML to the customer now? Are you still going to send emails like we do with PDFs, or what is the channel to do that? And unfortunately, I don't have great news here as well. Also, this is quite complex. I'm not going to go into the details of this slide because there's too much. What I want you to take away is there are many different models of how those XMLs should be interchanged, right? It's usually through a network. The most famous of that is Peppol, which is a European project. The ones in Belgium know it. That's what's becoming mandatory. Also, the people in France are probably aware of Peppol because it's part of the solution in France. But basically, governments, as they introduce the invoicing requirements, they also introduce how those XMLs should be exchanged, right? Just to like highlight one case here, if you look at the most complex one on the right, the decentralized CTC and exchange, that is what's required in France. So basically, what France is introducing is the fact that you are going to e-invoice, so send the XML to your customer, but you also e-report, you send that XML or a small version of that to the government for tax purposes. And that is the only thing I want to take you away from this very messy slide is every model out there of interchanging those XMLs is a mix of those two things. Sending e-invoices to your customer, which we call e-invoicing, but also sending sometimes a copy of that XML to the government for e-reporting purposes. So invoicing, e-reporting, sometimes a mix of those. All right, why does it matter? So after all of this, why do you care about this? Why does it matter for Europe, for you guys in general? Oops, I skipped a slide. So the context already kind of introduced. There's a directive called the VIT in the digital age, VIDA, that basically says that by 2030, real-time VAT reporting is mandatory. So every country will introduce e-invoicing, and also for intra-European transactions. So when you send an invoice from Germany to France, there will be another network that must be used to interchange those invoices. So potentially, actually not potentially, in reality, in 2030, a German will use one format and network potentially to send to the German customers, and a different one when they send to all the other European countries. But it also matters for other things. It makes it very easy. It's not only is regulation, it makes it very easy to match the purchase with the sales invoice. We already described how that structured data reduces a lot of fraud and increases transparency and so on. I'll go rather quick on this one as well because we already kind of discussed it. It matters a lot for governments for closing what they call the bad gap, which is the difference between the gap the government should be collecting and the bad they actually collect. It's proven that when you introduce invoicing, you reduce that, which is a good thing for the economy, obviously, and they enable the tax collection to be more efficient. And for business, we already described how this is going to make faster your approval process, eliminate manual data entry, and basically make you comply, which is also one thing we care about, right? All right, Europe's timeline. So let's now deep dive a bit into the history of the regulation. There's a lot of things here. The first thing I would say is so invoicing actually is kind of an old thing in the world. So it was introduced in Chile in 2003. As you can see on the left side of the slide, all of those are the countries that have either a current or upcoming invoicing requirement. You see that all of the Latin American continent, it already introduced it. It started with Chile in 2003, and then Brazil and Mexico in 2010. So they were kind of the pioneers. Then going back to Europe, the first things we saw about invoicing was first for business to government. And I think this is also important to take away for business to government transactions. So when you issue an invoice to a hospital, to a highway, anything owned by the state, since 2019, it's already mandatory to issue an electronic invoice. So you might have already been hear about these things. Peppol is used in many countries for B2G context, okay? So that's kind of like the status of the beginning of invoicing in Europe. Then Italy introduced mandatory B2B and B2C invoicing in 2019, and from there on, Portugal, Romania, many other countries have been slowly introducing. As you see on the right part of the slide, now it's kind of like a race. 2026, Spain, France, Belgium, Poland, Slovenia, Latvia. 2027, France again for the smaller companies, Germany, Spain with a credit criteria potentially, and then 2030 all of Europe. As you see, I covered a lot of ground up until now, so I'm going to give you a bit of a refresher, and Asta, I think, is going to run a poll quickly now.
Thank you, Juan. So, before we continue, I'd like to understand where you actually need an e-invoicing solution. In which countries do you need this solution? So, please feel free to submit your vote here.
And while you do that, I'm going to answer a question that is very common here. Maybe you don't know. Where do I need it? So, um, in general terms, you only need to comply with your domestic invoicing requirement. So, if you have a subsidiary in France, you need to comply with the French requirement. But if you have a subsidiary in France who issues, say, invoices to the German customers, you don't need to comply with the German requirements, only with the French one. So, only your domestic mandates. So, basically, the answer to this is where do you have subsidiaries? I made that a bit easier, maybe for some people. There's exceptions to that. B2G is one of those. There's other exceptions. Nothing is 100% true in tax, but yes. Hasta you let me know
Yeah,
how
I
what
think we start getting some answers here. Like 42%. Sorry, 42 people here need a solution in France, 30 in Spain, and then 29 in Germany, 29 rest of Europe. Maybe you can put in the comments where in the rest of Europe that you need the e-invoicing solution for. And then Belgium, which is like soon coming in January 2026, and the Netherlands, Italy, Poland, and Portugal. So
this is
maybe you
some.
want to continue, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So this is very helpful because I'm gonna now try to focus. So now, as you see, and I already introduced, the requirements change a lot, country by country. There's a lot of strange words in this slide, so I'm just gonna try to highlight the ones that you seem to care more about. So France, as you know, France is a e-invoicing plus e-reporting requirement. What that means is you have to issue electronic invoices, XMLs, through Peppol to your B2B customers, and then for your B2C or international B2B you can still send them a PDF, and you should, but you need to e-report. So put together an XML and send it to the tax authority. So that's a great example of e-invoicing plus e-reporting coming up in September 2026 for the largest companies and 2027 for the rest. Germany, it's purely B2B invoicing, only domestic. There's an exception in Germany that you might have known already, which is there's no network requirement. So all you have to do in Germany is send either Super or Eschragnun invoices, but you can send them in any network. Could be any network means can be email, however you want. Germany has said, and this is not published in almost any places because a bit of the record that they do plan on probably adopting Peppol in the future for B2B, but it's not official at all at the moment. Spain, well, I feel bad for my fellow people in Spain because there's a lot of requirements there. Probably too many for me to cover, but you got the very facto requirement coming up in January. That is technically not an invoicing requirement because you still send PDFs. And it's more of an e-reporting requirement. You send an XML that you need to generate that PDF to the tax authority, but your customer still gets PDF. And this is something important also as Pavel then kind of demos the platform. Our focus for this context is e-invoicing. So Payhawk is going to help you receive XMLs when when your vendors send them. But obviously, in the case of a Verifactu, in a case of requirements where they're still sending PDFs, that's not e-invoicing. Payhawk is still going to help you, but that they're going to use the OCR tool. It's not the invoicing because you're not getting XML. We'll discuss that more in detail later. Maybe just to cover the top four, also because we got people from Belgium. I think you guys are lucky because you got at least in my view, the most simple requirement, which is pure what we call four-corner invoicing through Peppol. So you have to send Peppol BIS 3.0 invoices to your customers through Peppol network. No, we reported at the moment, even though they will do. And I
But
can
the
see
thing,
already, Pavel, go ahead.
but, but they have the tightest deadline.
All
So
right,
I'm not sure about the
there you go.
usability there.
Yeah, they might not share with me that they're lucky. I don't know them. They might if they're feeling that lucky, but because they have 1 month to adopt it. So if they're in this webinar, I'm sure they might be rushing to this, or they already ahead of the curve. And I'm gonna leave it at as is for these slides. I don't want to be too much over the place on all the different requirements. Please use the questions to ask more on the different requirements and guidelines, and I can help you. All I want you to take away is unfortunately, Europe has not gotten together. Everyone is defining different models, formats, timelines, etc. Invopop has most of Europe covered, and by the future, we will cover pretty much all Europe and all of the biggest countries in the world. So we have a very aggressive roadmap, which I think is the reason why also Payhawk chose to partner with us, because we both share this global vision. Hopefully, by my fastest speaking in traditional of terms, at least you get away that there's a lot of complexity, a lot of fragmentation, and luckily you have vendors and solutions like Payhawk and Invopop that are trying to simplify this. So Pavel is going to explain a bit more on this fragmentation.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you. I'm really enjoying the humor in the chat. Because
I'm missing
I
that.
think this is not Europe's first rodeo in doing something way over engineered and more complicated than it needs to be. But there you have it. I think your closing is a really good segue to the problem that we're trying to tackle, which is the fragmentation. Naturally, Payhawk is positioned as a tool which operates on a global level. We have business in the US also, as most of you probably know. And for any multinational business, you can quickly see how it's getting quite hellish to try and navigate all of that, which is why we've partnered with Invopop exactly for that, to solve that challenge that everyone uses a different format, different network, and have actually one interface fully embedded into Payhawk where you can manage all of that complexity. Just to make sure, there's 32 different rules in different formats and different deadlines across Europe and beyond, which obviously, if you're a very globally expanded business and you have multinational operations, is going to be hard to navigate. So to recap on what Juan has been saying, like how it works on a high level, when you picture that from a AP process perspective. So when the supplier uses their relevant tool for invoicing, so their access point, to issue an invoice, that would go to a network like Peppol, let's say, in Belgium. Might or might not go through tax authorities, depending on the model that the country chose, and then ultimately enters the through another access point on the buyer side, enters the buyer's system for accounts payable. So supplier issues an invoice, their PDP validates and routes that invoice. Then we have Peppol, and accordingly then Invopop receiving that invoice, validating it on the receiving side, and Payhawk receives that invoice and makes sure that it flows elegantly into your AP process, the same way that it would for any other invoice. So if you have a plethora of, like a mixture of different invoices, like you have B2B domestic transactions in Belgium, but also you're buying software from the US, all of these invoices will flow into the same AP process. And it's just a matter about abstracting away the actual intake on the of the invoice. So in Payhawk, you can submit an invoice through your mobile app or through the web portal manually, or you can receive it by an email address and it can automatically flow into the AP process, or you can connect to Peppol or the likes and receive an invoice directly through an API integration. Then you can take it through your AP process and ultimately get into your ERP, either through one of our many live integrations, like with NetSuite, MSBC, you name it, or you can export anything in Excel and make sure that you can sync with whatever system you might have on the accounting side. Now, let's get into an actual live demo and into a little bit more detail as to how that fits into Payhawk. So what you would very soon be able to do, especially for our Belgian friends in the call here, is you're going to have an integration available with Peppol. And under the hood, that would be using Invopop, but you don't really need to actually have any account on Invopop. You don't need to go through any onboarding and so on. So what we do is we fully embed the invoicing solution within Payhawk, meaning that you can drive the whole onboarding process through the platform. So I go to my Peppol integration here and go to connected. Now we are going to automatically identify if you already have an existing Peppol ID associated to your entity based on the VAT ID that you have, or if you don't, we're going to generate one for you. How that looks is, let's say we're going to be generating a new Peppol ID. We're going to link your VAT number and country. We're gonna assign an owner for the integration. So just in case there's something going wrong, we know who to kind of chase to make sure that we can resolve any issues. And then you're going to upload a document to verify the ownership. Usually, this is quite simple. You can upload even like a simple invoice with a direct debit mandate. Peppol is quite flexible and they accept quite a lot of different types of documents to verify the ownership. So in this case, I upload quickly an invoice in here. I continue with the process, and up to 72 hours from now, I'm going to get my Peppol ID. Now, Juan tells me that this happens usually within one business day, but we do have, an exceptional case here and there where we might take a couple, but still, it's a very short and quick process to get your Peppol ID up and running. Now, once you do have that, eventually we're going to establish the connection and you're going to get your Peppol ID in here. That Peppol ID you can share with your suppliers and they can issue invoices to Peppol routed to your Peppol ID, much like you would previously give them an accounts payable email address where you're supposed to get your billing invoices at. Now, how that actually looks in the product, and let's switch here quickly to Payhawk and a live demo. So I'm in my expenses app here, and I just like a little while ago, I sent myself through Peppol an invoice. How it actually looks is, and let me just make sure to move away my thingy here. So how it actually looks is this is what I receive as a file. This is what we were talking about earlier. It's an XML where I can clearly see the data on the invoice, the document number, document date, due date, amounts, currencies, VAT IDs, all of that is coded into the invoice itself. There is no guessing what is on the invoice. There is no human needed to read it. Now we take that file, but we also generate a PDF for you to be able to easily preview what's on the invoice so that it's a little bit more appealing to humans. So extract all of the data. And actually what you can see here is that this invoice is fully automatically coded because we've extracted all of that information from the invoice. And this is where, because it's an invoice, we have 100% confidence on what the data looks like. So there's the amount, the tax amount, tax rate, the document number, document date, due date. All of that is actually extracted directly from the eInvoicing XML. Now, apart from that, we've also linked that to a request. So in this case, I've requested in advance these development services. Maybe I can quickly actually show how that looks also. So if I jump quickly to my requests tab, you would notice that in here, I have an approved and open request to hire a third-party contractor for developing an ERP integration. I've accounted for 200 hours, 90 euros per hour for a total of 18K euros. Now, when I actually go to my bill, when I receive that invoice, the system automatically recognizes that there's an open request expected from that vendor. There's a bill that we receive, the amounts match. So it's pretty simple for the system to figure out that this is actually a request, a requested in advance invoice, meaning that it was proactively approved. Why is that important? Because when this request was initially approved, and this is just the bill that we've all agreed in the business to process, once I submit that invoice, it gets automatically approved. So if I go and check this, you would see that it's automatically approved in this case. How that actually works, let me take a quick detour to the workflows. Now, if you check the workflows for the bill, this is what just happened. I submitted the bill and it had a matched request and there was no approval workflow. You directly move on to the review stage, which is where your finance team would do their accounting work and push data into the ERP. Now, if there was an issue with that request, if maybe it was the invoice was for 20K and not 18, we would go through this route here, which is a discrepancy approval. And maybe in this case, I've set my procurement manager, Emily, here to approve that. Maybe we challenge the vendor. We want to understand and investigate why we were charged more than we expected. Or if there is no request on that bill, so this bill lacks any sort of context in the system on what is it for, then we have a more diligent process to make sure that we accept that. So we go through team manager first. If the amount is big, we go through the CFO maybe for over 30,000 euros. And I can be as flexible as I need here. I can add parallel steps, I can add more steps. I can use conditions based on the category, the geo, the cost center, the supplier, anything that I need to make sure that I have the right level of control in the system. Now, if I switch back in here, let's see how that actually looks. I'm going to remove the request and reset this invoice. So I'm going to return it quickly just to see how it would play out if I submit it again, but without it being requested. So this is when it would actually move to my Approve tab, meaning that these are all of the bills that are currently awaiting approval from the business. And here as an approver, I can see all of the dates on the invoice. I can also see the impact on my budget. So I've added my budget into Payhawk. I have a third-party R&D budget, which is 50,000 euros per month. But in this case, I've already utilized a chunk of it. I have some committed also for this month. So I have an open request for it, expecting to be invoiced more on that. And with this invoice, I'm actually going to go over budget. So as a budget owner here, I have the full visibility on how this is going to impact me. Now, let's say this is business critical and I need to approve it anyways. I can accept the responsibility. The idea here is to make informed decisions. So once I approve that, it moves on to the review stage. In the review stage, I would have my finance team, my accountants, reviewing everything, making sure that we have the right categorization in place. This is going to go into the right GL cost center locations and eventually push that data and reconcile it into the ERP. Now, once I'm happy with the data in here, I can review that and it's going to automatically export into my ERP. Once reviewed, it's going to move on to the payment stage. And this is where the payment step is broken down into two steps: confirming details and authorizing transfers. If you go back to the workflow for a little bit just to see how that looks, you can set that up in a way that you have a 4 eyes principle in place where the details are actually confirmed by the accountants who make sure that the bank account on the invoice and on the supplier on record check out, and then have administrators authorize the payment to finally execute the bank transfer directly through Payhawk. We have bank transfers in a lot of different native currencies, so we can use local rates in a lot of places. Where we don't, we also have a global payment solutions where you can pay in more than 100 currencies and in the relevant regions. Now, since this is a dummy supplier, it's actually not a real account holder, which is something that the system actually flags that this beneficiary is not found. I'm going to quickly accept that risk and I'm going to confirm the details. And something to note here is that I can also schedule the payment on the exact date that I want. By default, that would be on due date. Conveniently, it's exactly on Christmas. Unlikely that someone would be paying a bill through the system on Christmas. So it's quite nice that I can actually schedule this payment to go out directly on Christmas and make sure I can delay that net negative cash flow as much as possible. Then we move on to the authorization step. We're going to have the same warning for the authorizer of the payment. They're going to see the same information and apply, a second set of eyes to authorizing this transfer. Once they authorize, what's going to happen is I'm going to get a notification on my phone. And once I open that, I'll be able to confirm the payment, making sure that we have, the full secure authorization from the admin. Looks something like this, if I can get away from the background being cut out. But once I approve that bank transfer, the payment will be scheduled, and I would see my scheduled payments in here, and this would nicely execute on Christmas as a present to some supplier. So that kind of wraps it up. Like, that's how we handle the whole process in Payhawk, from receiving the actual e-invoice to automating as much as possible your AP journey, from the accounting review to the payment, through the approval workflows, so that you can keep all of the stakeholders in the process engaged. I think that wraps it up on the product side. So I'm going to stop sharing and we can go back to the slides where probably the only natural question that flows in right now is what is actually going on with accounts receivable. So while Payhawk is, as you've seen, positioned to solve the AP journey end to end and gets all of your data into the ERP in a compliant way with invoicing, there's two more touch points with regards to invoicing, which you need to be aware of. Depending on the country and the region, you might need to also do e-reporting through your ERP, and you might also need to be able to issue invoices when you're billing suppliers. So in both of these cases, while this is out of scope for Payhawk, as we are on an AP automation tool, what we do is we have a very well established network of partners which can support you in that. So don't be afraid to ask us for help. We can connect you with the relevant people. We work with a bunch of different companies that are implementers on different ERPs that we support, and we can actually get you in touch with the right people to make sure that you're covered also on the reporting side and on the issuing side. So I think that wraps up my part, and maybe Asta, we can now go into the Q&A. I see a lot of questions flowing into the chat, so it's good that we have quite a few minutes left to cover these.
Thank you, Pavel, for your demo. So let's move into the Q&A here. I will try to sort it by upvotes. I hope this works. So first we have the question from Sylvie. Sylvie Rodriguez, what happens if supplier do not comply with sending invoices via Peppol? Do we still need to process their invoices?
That's a good one. So to reinstate the question is what happens, if I still receive a PDF. I'm in Belgium, for example, and I still receive a PDF. Do I need still to process it? Well, technically, by law, you haven't received a valid invoice. So you should go back to your vendor and say, please send me a valid invoice, which is the XML. That is by law, because obviously two there's two purposes in an invoice, for the issuer, but also for the recipient. So you, as the recipient of the invoice, you must store it. You might be able to show it in case of an inspection. So I would recommend that the way to proceed there is go back to your vendor and ask him to please send you a correct invoice, which is an XML through Peppol. That said, for commercial reasons, you might still want to make the payment while that is being fixed, but that is a kind of commercial discussion outside of the scope of what I can discuss.
Thank you, Juan. And then we have another question from Charles Delay. Is it working for Italy?
Right. So maybe I can cover this one. Do you hear me, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes.
we hear you loud and clear.
Notification that I'm muted. So all right. So for Italy, basically, it's one of the regions, one of the many regions that Invopop supports. And since we're integrated with them, it's going to be quite easy for us to add support for the region in due time. Our current focus is to support Belgium as a region, since they have the tightest incoming deadline and we have the biggest demand there. We're going to be doing that already in December. So in a few weeks, we should be live with a solution where anybody can connect to Peppol and receive invoices from Peppol in Belgium. But in Q1 next year, we're going to be significantly expanding our regional coverage, adding more countries, adding more file formats that we support. So very shortly into 2026, I think we're also going to be having Italy as one of the many regions that we support.
And another question from Sebastian Jacobs. We use an email to receive our invoices from our supplier. Is it possible for our email to send an automated response if the invoice received is not Peppol compliant?
I think that would be a really good question to your IT team, because it would be something that happens before I think it enters the system into Payhawk. If you do forward an invoice into Payhawk, we wouldn't have the context in the system whether this is as regulated in your country and whether it actually needs to be an invoice, but it isn't. So that one would be on you, I'm afraid.
And then Donald Quinn. In Belgium, there is a 3-month grace period that allows vendors to get their systems ready. Is this correct?
Not that I'm aware of, frankly. I don't know everything on every regulation, but just very recently, the tax authority didn't say that. They might have introduced it recently. Feel free to post in the chat if you have a URL. Some things do catch me off guard, but the latest I've heard from the tax authorities, there's no grace period. I remember he actually quoted. I'm gonna go a bit over here, but he quoted that if you put a speed limit at 130, sorry, 120, but then you start charging at 130, people go at 130. So I remember him saying we start in January, no grace period. But yeah, please post it on the chat if you have anything that I we might not be aware of.
Okay, thank you, Juan. So another question from Umar Azam. Regarding expenses, is Payhawk converting these, i.e., employees taking picture of receipts and sending them to PDP?
So I feel like this is probably a question related to e-reporting. Um,
This is e-reporting, right?
yeah,
So this is why I made such an effort, or like why I wanted to separate e-invoicing from e-reporting. So basically, as you rightly say, um, you would have to e-report those, convert them from PDF to structured format, usually in your ERP, and then e-report that. In the case of France, so I don't think it's covered at the moment. What I think, Umar, should happen there anyway, in the case of France, is if so let's say this guy goes to a restaurant. If he wants to expense that and he asks for an invoice, then that becomes a B2B invoice, and the restaurant will send it via Peppol to Payhawk. So that becomes the same flow we've been discussing. But if someone goes and then doesn't ask for what we call the complete invoice, doesn't give his complete details, that's a B2C invoice, effectively, right? So the moment it goes from a B2C to B2B is when someone actually gives the company details, and then the POS of the restaurant will be connected to Peppol and send that through Invopop Payhawk to your company through Peppol. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Juan. So we have a very good question here from, sorry, I lost track of this, from Karen Bertho. Does this mean all your AP needs to run through Payhawk or only the payments by card? We have set up another system to receive our AP with Paypal, the system where all our projects are registered.
it's a
Either Pavel or Juan.
it's a great question. I can take that one. So that the way it works is with Peppol, while it's not officially supported, you can have multiple Peppol IDs if you register them using a different parameter, so to say. So you can register with a VAT ID, you can register with an IBAN. So the Peppol ID you already have, you can keep it functioning in the same way, and then create a new one through Payhawk, as we're going to give you also the option to register with different parameters. So you're going to be basically having two Peppol IDs and having to manage which one you use for which invoices that you'll be receiving. And
Exactly.
then you can freely flow one set of invoices, let's say the ones paid by card in your case, into Payhawk using your Payhawk Peppol ID. And then the other one you can keep as you have it right now.
And if I can add here, this is a very good question, and one that we service providers, we keep asking the tax authorities, and they're very much aware this is limitation. It's quite hacky to force you guys to use VAT number for one flow and then IBAN number for another flow, so they differentiate. Just think of a huge company that might have 50 different flows. So I don't know where this question is coming from, if it's Belgium or France, but both tax authorities plan on doing something more elegant in the future. So yeah, they're aware of that.
Thank you. So I think this is one of the favorite questions from everyone.
Yep.
From Clément Welbeck, will Payhawk be certified as PA, platform assermenté by the French authorities?
Right. So the quick answer is, if we wanted to do that, Juan won't be on the call. So the whole idea here is that we want to position ourselves in a way that we can move quickly. Unlike some of the other providers in the industry, we don't have a majority of our business in one specific region, or like a few specific regions. So instead of us trying to build into all of our own integrations into all of these different networks, we chose to partner with Invopop as a global provider, where we can really easily provide a global solution, where if you operate in 15 countries and they have 15 different invoicing mandates, you can operate all of them out of Payhawk. That's the goal here. And for us to be able to do that at scale, we needed to partner with someone like Invopop to make sure that we have a quick way to address any upcoming regulations without us being certified ourselves, but Invopop always obviously being a PA. I think there was one more question about being certified as a Peppol access point, as a PDP. So their coverage is quite wide. Maybe we can probably share here a quick link also to their website page in the chat on the coverage section.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So
Um,
yeah,
and we have, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, yeah, we're Peppol Access Point PA, which is what used to be PDP, and certified in all of the countries that we have to be according to our list. So yeah, rest assured there. And we are also participating in the French pilot already, and there's only 11 PAs out of the 100 that are already that have passed the pilot, and we're among the ones that are faster there. So we're not only there but also very fast.
That's a very good point. Like among like 100 plus, only 10% are participating in the pilot
In the
and
pilot so
infographic.
far, I mean, I guess some of them will participate. Many others will drop. They just passed the first phase and they don't want to do it anymore now that they learned about it.
Okay, so next question from Sylvia Rodriguez. Does this mean that only the finance team will be able to upload invoices into Payhawk since budget owners will never receive invoices sent through Peppol? In that case, would the submit function be exclusively used by the finance team? Pavel?
I think that would probably be a little bit better answered to by Juan, I think.
Can you summarize the question again? Sorry, I think I missed one part. I'm not sure on the question.
It's the top one on the questions tab.
Okay,
So
I'll go
if
for
the
it.
Peppol
No.
ID is available somewhere, like in a public directory where it can be found by suppliers, instead of the customer having to proactively share that with their suppliers.
Yeah, but it's not mandatory that they're there, basically. So there is a Peppol directory that is searchable, and also in France there's the annuaire, which is kind of like a layer on top of it. It has more information than the Peppol directory, but it's not mandatory. In France, it is mandatory that you register on the annuaire, so you can look up in the annuaire the customer. Um, in the other Peppol countries, it's not mandatory that your customer is registered. Also for GDPR reasons, they may not want to be there. So I think the safest bet here is just like you're asking your customers at the moment to give you the email where they wish to receive invoices, and the same is happening to you when you act as a customer. Just do the same with the Peppol participant ID. This is my recommendation. So the flow is kind of like the same.
So I think this another question from Sylvia Rodriguez, and this one I think is directed for Pavel. Does this mean that only the finance team will be able to upload invoices into Payhawk, since budget owners will never receive invoices sent through PayPal? In that case, would the submit function be exclusively used by the finance team?
It's really good question. I have a short-term answer and a long-term answer on this one. I think on the short term, this is where once the invoice gets into the system, it works as in any other case, like as if it was manually uploaded, as if it came in by email. So what actually happens is it goes into your AP process, which currently has a submit step where you need to make sure that you have the right fields populated to kick off the approval process. Now, the long-term vision, or maybe I would say midterm for that, is that as we can more confidently automate all of the data on the invoice, we can also automatically submit it so that the approval workflow is actually the first touch point in the system, and there is no explicit action required from a user to go and submit that. So imagine that if you have all of your fields which are required to submit populated automatically, it would just automatically submit and get into the approval workflow. That's how it should work in the short to midterm, I would say. But right now, you're right. It would go into the submit tab, and you would need to have your finance team submitting these invoices into the approval process.
Thank you, Pavel. Another one from Cornelia Jacqueline. say. I hope I pronounced that well. If not, I'm sorry. If a Payhawk card is used to purchase B2B services, will the invoice received through Invopop automatically match to the corresponding open and reconciled card expense and attach the document?
Yeah, it's a great question. So this is where, and I think I'm going to answer a part of it and then pass over to Juan also. But the idea is that our system would be intelligent enough to know that as an invoice comes into the system, we know what card transactions you have right now, and if we understand that the e-invoice is paid, and we can match it to a card transaction, we're going to automatically upload it as a document to the already unreconciled card transaction. Now, if there is no card transaction, we'll create it as a new bill. The tricky bit here is that in the invoicing world, we might not always be able to tell if the invoice is paid, because while there is support for basically the invoice knowing if it's prepaid or not, from Juan, I know because I've asked his question to him, it's not that reliable. Juan, do you want to add something on that?
Yes, so that's a good summary. There's a couple of things at play here. So, for example, in France, um, there's a requirement to also report the payments, as you know. So to report a status, like the invoice status there. So their Payhawk will have some more information, but that same kind of architecture that France is going to use for reporting payments in other countries like Belgium, which is what Pavel is speaking about, it's present, but it's not mandatory at all. And what our experience is, basically no one is using it. So a question we get a lot is, hey, can I also send this status through Peppol of whether the invoice has been paid, or when or where I want to reject it or partially accept it? All of those messages are possible through Peppol, but the reality is this is a chicken and egg problem. If you're sending them to your vendor, and the vendor doesn't accept them, you're speaking to a empty room, right? So that's just kind of like to pick the picture in terms of regulation. Only France, also Spain with CARECAF is going to introduce it, but most of the countries don't don't force companies to use this payment not payment status, which means that most people don't use it. The other thing I will add there to like um, because this is a really good question. How's Payhawk gonna reconcile those things that now you cannot scan with your phone anymore, but they come to a Peppol network and so on? There's a myriad of fields that you can add to the invoice. So, for example, one scenario I envision is you can probably ask your vendor, even if it's a restaurant or even if it's like a more established vendor, to include numbers in there, be it the purchase order, be it the buyer. So there's fields that you can use to do that reconciliation. And if there's one thing that invoicing accept, it's all types of structure fields, and that's something I think not only us Invopop Payhawk, I think that Europe in general is going to start using more and more those like reference fields, whatever it is, a purchase order reference, whatever you want to call it, to do that three-way matching a bit better.
Okay, thank you. We still have quite a few questions. I'm so happy that people are excited, but we'll do our best to tackle everything. The next one from Boy Boon Y. What is current status for Germany?
Um, Payhawk wise or e-invoicing wise? So
I
regulation
think
wise or
e-invoicing wise.
okay, got it. So in Germany, it's from January 2025. So from this past January, it's mandatory to be able to receive e-invoices. What that means is if someone sends you any invoice in a EN 16931 standard, so Zugfer or Eschrechnung in the case of Germany, you cannot complain with the VAT law in your hand. So you cannot say, hey, this is not a valid invoice. You need to be able to process it, which is the same category that paper had up until now. That is the way that companies are interpreting this in Germany is that if your customer requests that to be sent an invoice, you have to send it. So basically, that's the way that it's playing out at the moment. People upon request are sending invoices to the customer that requested. To the rest, they're sending PDFs. That's January. January 2027, it's going to be mandatory to issue electronic invoices. So the whole economy issue electronic invoices for B2B domestic. Okay, this all that I'm saying for Germany is B2B domestic invoices mandatory January 2027 for the companies with turnover above 800 million 800K, sorry, 100 million is huge. 100K euros turnover, and then 2028 for the rest of the economy. So those are the three deadlines to keep in mind for Germany.
Thank you, Juan. So another one, sorry. Elijah Smith asks, does intercompany, oh my God, it moves. Does intercompany invoicing within two different entities in Belgium also need both AR and AP via Peppol?
Can you? Sorry, I gotta be honest. I got distracted reading one question in the chat. Can you repeat it for me?
Yeah, sure. So does intercompany invoicing within two different entities in Belgium
Yep.
also need both AR and AP via Peppol?
Yes. So the law doesn't make any difference for interco companies. There's one tricky thing there, and we've investigated this a lot, which is um, in Belgium, in most countries, if both parties have an agreement, they can interchange anything that's a structure that complies with the EN 6931 standard. So in theory, if they're exchanging anything that has the same fields as are required by Peppol, they wouldn't need to do it through Peppol, if that makes sense. So I don't know if they're exchanging ERP like SAP iDocs between intercompanies. In theory, that would comply with the law. Um, but that's the only w- kind of way around it, which is basically if there's a mutual agreement between two companies, they can agree to use a different format. And obviously, in an interco case, you always have mutual agreement. I would say the easiest anyway is still to use the Peppol, for like you do for the rest of your customers and vendors.
Okay, thank you, Juan. We have 4 minutes. I can like we can stay over time 5 minutes if Juan and Pavel you have time for 5 more minutes. Yeah, okay. Because we have still a lot of questions. So the next one, Alain Batonzier, in Payhawk, how does the system identify the correct approvers for an electronic invoice and link the invoice to the correct purchase order and the corresponding owner who has in charge to validate the delivery part associated relative to the invoice?
Good question. So the short answer it would be the same way that it would do it for non e-invoice, so like a standard PDF. Now, what I read into this question is that it's a more general question about our AP capabilities, which, if I had to answer, we have very like various mechanisms to automatically populate the categorization on your invoice. And then depending on what your workflow is based on, so whether it's team manager approval, whether it's geocode approval, whether it's just like specific people under specific thresholds, you can have very different setups, but the whole workflow is driven by the expense fields on the invoice itself. So all of these fields, we have different sources to automate them. You can directly connect values of these fields with specific suppliers or with specific teams within your company. You can also rely on the historical data that you have in the system. So if you don't have any rules to automate these values, what the system does by default is it learns based on your past bills. So if you review a bill for supplier X, and then you have like a similar bill in the future, like 1 month later, let's say, we're going to learn from that past context and apply the same categorization to that new bill so that you can have all of the data that you need on the bill to drive the correct workflow. So it's a very complex answer that depends a lot on the context and the exact workflow that you want to execute. But if you get in touch with your Payhawk champion, I think we can dive into a little bit more details and just see how that would be applicable to you. Short answer is we have a lot of tools to automatically categorize the expense so that you can go to the right workflow. There was one more part of this question, which is about the recognition of what is the purchase order. So this is where if we have a PO number on the invoice, we're going to scan that automatically and link it to the PO. If not, we still have an AI-driven logic which knows the context of all of your open requests and reads the context of the document to make sure that we understand both, and if there's a meaningful, confident match we can make it. Even if we don't automatically match it, you also can do that manually. But our ambition here is to be matching your requests or your POs automatically in 98% of the time, probably.
Okay, thank you, Pavel. Another question from Bruno Basic, and this one is for Juan. In Croatia, there is a list of approved providers for electronical invoices. Are you on this list or working to be?
We're not on this list, and it's something we want to tackle next year. However, we will sometimes do is we partner with, I mean, we prefer to go direct ourselves, but in the case of Croatia, we've looked at it quite a lot. We might actually partner with the local provider, the major one that the government formed, which I forget the name of. But yeah, it's something it's on our roadmap for next year, and we will make the call on whether going native or through a third party in case it
I
makes
Okay,
sense.
I would follow up on behalf of the person who asked the question. When?
When? Okay, it's a good one. It's somewhere in the roadmap. I think we've got it for Q2, if I'm not mistaken. But the other thing we always say is our roadmap is very, very flexible in terms of we just match demand with it, so it changes quite a lot based on what our customers are asking for.
yeah. Okay, another one from Umar Azam. As the current OCR scanned invoices in Payhawk are pushed to ERP, in this case NetSuite, Payhawk will continue to push invoices too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Which is
So
yes.
from the perspective of Payhawk, it doesn't really matter if the invoice came in through a manual upload, through a mailbox, or through Peppol, let's say in this case. In the end, it's the same process, it's the same life cycle for all of your different invoices, and the end goal is reconciling all of that data for the bill and for the payment into your ERP. Asta, maybe
And
just one question I want to cover because I think it's interesting from Ines about pricing. So how do you price invoicing in Payhawk? Do we have to pay for it at both ERP and Payhawk level? I think that's a good one to answer live. So invoicing in Payhawk itself is going to be embedded into your AP plan. So if you have our accounts payable module for bill payments, you would also have invoicing support for all of the regions that we will support without any extra fee or charge. That means that if you use Payhawk, for you, receiving invoices would be free. Then when it comes to e-reporting or issuing invoices, it would be something that you would usually drive through your ERP, which is when earlier we were talking about that, as we said, we can connect you with our relevant partners to make sure that we get you in touch and on top of that.
okay, thank you, Pavel. And this one is for Juan from Clemence Wilbeck. Invopop, the PA for France, indicates on its website that it will be live on Q3 2025. As Q3 is already passed, could you confirm the exact date when it will be live? I think it's a matter of updating the website, I
It's a
believe.
matter of updating the website. Yeah, so we are as live as you can be. We participate in the pilot. We are, but we get caught a lot because we mentioned those days in several places in the website, and they're not linked. So you know what happens. So thank you for calling that out. Now we're already a PA sous demand. We participate in the pilot. We're Peppol Access Point, so as we can be as certified as you can be basically at the moment.
Okay. Thank you. So I think there was one from Sylvie that is very interesting. How will the Payhawk Invopop slash ERP integration match supplier records across the systems? If I already have a supplier created in Payhawk and in NetSuite, but the information coming from Invopop does not match, what will happen? Will the existing supplier record be updated based on Invopop data?
It's a good question. Actually, that would be completely up to you. So what would happen is you would have a supplier record which is not only available into NetSuite but also in Payhawk, because we have a bidirectional integration with NetSuite for suppliers, meaning that the supplier data in NetSuite and in Payhawk is the same. If you get an invoice from a supplier which has different data than what you have on your supplier record, then you would either update your supplier record if that's legitimate, or if not, maybe it might be a reason to flag that invoice as fake or wrong and just bounce it back to the supplier.
Yeah. To add there, because I think this is an answer to many questions I use a lot. The regulation is not changing that many things, believe it or not. So the VAT law, all of those things have been in place in all countries for years. What is changing is the format. So the same processes you had in place for email plus PDF, in general, they stay the same for Peppol plus XML. So this question also applies to email plus PDF. You're solving this already somehow, and this applies to many other types of questions.
Exactly.
Another one from Winston Queresius. Can we enforce e-invoicing on our suppliers even if not required yet by legislations? We are
Mhm.
based in the Netherlands.
So you commercially can. Yes, there's nothing against that. The law says that you can, by mutual agreement, do it. A mutual agreement is a fun concept because obviously this happens to me a lot. When Invopop signs large customers, we have to submit the invoices through Ariba or Coupa, and well, the mutual agreement means that otherwise I don't sign the contract. It's not that I like submitting them through Coupa Ariba, so that's already invoicing. So yes, if you have the leverage to impose that on your vendors, you certainly can.
Okay. So Tiago Flor Placido is asking if this e-invoicing is created for a VAT registered company, does that means that invoices created for the individuals will not be concerned and that the process will be same as before? I think asking for B2C.
B2C, right? So in for e-invoicing, if you take the very definition of invoicing, I would say every mandate affects only B2B because if you think about it, no one in his right mind, as a personal individual, cares about receiving an XML. You don't do accounting, you don't do reconciliation of your own expenses. The thing is, then when you get those requirements mixed with what I call e-reporting, like in France, then you start having requirements on B2C invoices or receipts. So that's the case of Verifactu. Verifactu doesn't encompass B2B and B2C because it's e-reporting. So you still send PDFs to your B2C and B2B customers, but you e-report them. The same for France, which is a mix of B2B invoicing and B2C e-reporting. But for pure e-invoicing, 99% of the cases, I'm sure there's an exception there that I'm missing. Italy is kind of an exception there. You They only affect B2B.
Okay, just to move forward, we kind of past 7 minutes. I would like to check with Pavel and Juan. Are we still okay with 3 minutes more?
I can do 3 more minutes.
Yeah.
After
Okay.
that, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you share with us then offline.
I,
Um,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, what we'll do is any unanswered questions, we will also make sure to follow up with you folks offline because there were quite a lot and we couldn't cover all of them. But anytime, like on our webinars, what we do is we gather the data from the questions at the end and make sure that we get in touch to give you answers.
Okay. So this one is from Lucas Drigotas. How will Payhawk pick the right entity to put the e-invoice into?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I don't think I heard that.
How, yeah, sorry. How will Payhawk pick the right entity to put the e-invoice into?
Okay, so this is where actually you would have one ID per legal entity because each of your subsidiaries is separate entities that you would register with their VAT IDs. So that means that unlike with a mailbox solution, let's say where you have one email address for 10 different entities, there is no such problem actually with invoicing because each Peppol ID would be unique to your specific subsidiary.
Okay, thank you, Pavel, for answering that. And another one, I think this would be the last one. We already have a Peppol access point for incoming invoices directly in our ERP system. How will this be compatible for Payhawk, which should receive the incoming invoices for things paid with a Payhawk card?
Um, I'm trying to find that to reach with because I'm not sure I could
I,
follow.
I
It's
think
a
I think Pavel is the same question. I think we kind of answered, and it makes no sense that they keep asking because it's a nightmare, right? If you have two receiving access points, basically
Right.
one already through your ERP for order flow, and then you're also using Payhawk, and Payhawk is going to be your access point effectively through Invopop. So the answer here is you need to have each of those systems with a different Peppol participant ID, so a different Peppol address. Okay, so one of them could use your VAT number as their Peppol participant ID, and then another one could use a different identifier of the ones that are allowed, such as your IBAN number or your GLN. Even, and I don't know if I should say this live, but this is said by Peppol, the actual Peppol community. Um, there, there are no checks in Peppol against using suffix. So we can inscribe you. I might regret saying this, but just so you know that this Peppol is also defining some of these things. You can use suffix to the Peppol participant ID, but they're kind of, as I said, the tax authorities are kind of exploring these problems that you're asking, kind of as we speak. Um, and as I see the closing, the good thing is at least you're in good hands here. We stay very close to the regulation. And yeah, I'm sure, Pavel, Asta, you have other closing thoughts here, but very happy with these questions also, guys. Thank you.
So thank you everyone for all of your questions, and we are very happy that everyone is very motivated to understand about e-invoicing. Unfortunately, we cannot address everything, but we will try our best. After this ends, you will have the recording, and we will try our best to follow up your questions. So just to close here, at the end, Payhawk and Invopop missions is to unify the spend, AP, and invoicing in one platform. So all in one here is your keywords. So we want to be Europe ready and future ready for you. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Pavel. Thank you, Juan.
Thank you, Asta. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Take care.
Thank you all. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.